So I'm going to be real with you all, I'm not really a fan of Disney movies. That doesn't mean that they're bad or unenjoyable, they're just not movies that I really watch. I'm not really the target demographic for your average animated Disney movie. Now, when I was a kid, I enjoyed them, but for the most part, I didn't really understand them the way I do today. I guess what I'm saying is that I've exchanged my enjoyment for appreciation. And the thing that I appreciate most are the villains, because honestly, Disney villains are way more complex than most villains in most children's media. Really, in most media in general, honestly. But now that I'm older, I have a different understanding of the way Disney movies are made, because they're not really just movies, they're also musicals, and with that comes a structure. So when I talk about today's topic, I want to focus on the fact that the musical structure is as important as the structure of the movie. Now, even when I was a kid, and even really now, I don't really like The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and part of that's because it doesn't really work as an adaptation. The original source material is just way too dark and way too specific, and they have to remove so much of it that it just doesn't really gel. But the one thing that does gel, the one thing that's great about the movie, is Frollo, specifically his song, Hellfire. Because the song is so many things and defines so much about the movie that you can't remove it without really taking away from the movie itself. There are some movies in Disney's catalog where the villain song is great, but it doesn't really define the movie. You know, when you think of things like, say, The Jungle Book, the villain's song in the movie doesn't really define the movie the way something like Bare Necessities does. When you think about, like, The Lion King, Be Prepared's a great song, but it doesn't define the movie the way something like Hakuna Matata does, or even The Circle of Life. But Hellfire defines the movie. Hellfire defines The Hunchback of Notre Dame, because so much is conveyed in this song. Now, before we go deeper, we have to really go into musical theory, so stay with me for a second. In musicals, there's two major kinds of songs: the I am song and the I want song. You can probably imagine a few of these from musicals. The I am song is when the character talks about themselves and who they are. It's usually the song that defines the character, and in some cases is when the villain defines themselves. Think about, say, in Beauty and the Beast, Gaston's song is an I am song. I want songs are usually the songs sung by the protagonist. That's the song where the character talks about what they desire. It sets the tone for the movie. When you think of, you know, the character who is singing about wanting more or whatever it is that they're looking for, that's the I want song. Hellfire is unique because it's both an I am song and an I want song. The song is about Frollo defining himself, but it's also defining what he wants. And so we both learn who he is really at his core, as well as what he wants. And every part of the song gives us more insight into his relationships. It gives us more insight into how he sees the world, his own relationship with himself. And as a result, the song itself elevates the rest of the movie. Now, I'm not really focusing on the imagery because I think it distracts you from the lyrics, because the lyrics are what tell you everything you need to know. Because the first line in the song is Frollo saying that he's a godly man and that he's proud of that. Pride is a sin, and yet he is fully proud of his own righteousness, which is in itself a sin, which defines the whole song. He defines himself and prays, but he's not really praying to God, because he's saying that he's purer than everyone else, that he is more pure, that he is more virtuous than the common people because of his position. He's committing worldly acts, but he doesn't recognize this. He's asking the Virgin Mary, he's asking God, why is it that he's tempted if he's so pure? He can't see that he's not actually pure. The thing is, he's willing to blame everyone and everything except himself. He blames Esmeralda, he blames God, and he says things like, why did God make the devil stronger than a man? He's not taking responsibility for his own sin. He's saying it's God's plan for him to fall, but he never really tries to resist it. He refuses to take responsibility, he refuses to accept blame for his own faults, and as a result, he damns himself. But the thing about the song is that it's one big rationalization. Because the thing is, he's not actually sorry. He's begging for forgiveness, but he's not actually sorry about the fact that he's sinning. In fact, the whole thing is that, well, it's not his fault. It's, God did this to me, so I'm not to blame for any of this. He's spending the whole song rationalizing his own faults, but he's rationalizing not to God, but himself, which is why he begins the song much sorrier than he is at the end of the song. By the end of the song, he's gone from praying to God for forgiveness to saying that, well, she can choose me or she can choose fire, but either way, I'm going to get something out of this. Either I'm going to get the satisfaction of owning her as a person, or I'm going to get the satisfaction of watching her burn. And the thing is that the choir in the background that keeps saying, Lord have mercy, isn't saying that for him anymore. It starts off by saying that, he's a poor person because he's tempted to sin, but because of all the things that he says during the song, it's no longer saying, Lord have mercy for him, because he's a bad person who doesn't take responsibility and thus isn't worthy of forgiveness. It's saying, Lord have mercy for his victims, because his victims haven't done anything wrong. That's the thing, is that even if they're sinful themselves, they haven't done anything to deserve his wrath, his pride, his greed, his lust. Nothing that they've done deserves what he's going to do to them. The other thing that's kind of interesting is that the chorus is singing in Latin. And if you don't know Latin and haven't looked up the definitions for what it's singing, you don't really understand what it's repeating in him. See, at the same time that he's saying, it's not my fault, it's God that did this whole thing, the chorus is saying it's totally his fault. The chorus keeps saying mea culpa, keeps saying through my fault, which means that, yeah, it's totally his fault, and God is blaming him for his fault, but not so much the fault itself as the fact that he refuses to take responsibility for his faults. Part of this is Catholicism, but part of Catholicism itself is that you're forgiven, but forgiveness doesn't mean you can just do whatever you want and then say, well, yeah, I'm fallen, please forgive me. That's not how it works. Forgiveness means you have to actually be sorry for the things you did. Not just sorry because you're being punished for it. Sorry because you understand that you were a bad person and that what you did was bad and wrong. So the entire song is Frollo, who is rationalizing his evil acts and specifically turning away from God. He's becoming less and less godly as the song goes on. In some ways, the thing that makes it interesting is that by being the one to decide somebody else's fate, being the one who's going to decide whether or not somebody faces hellfire or not, he's elevating himself to the same status as God. Yeah, he's a mortal man, but he can decide life and death. And if God made him out to be this way, then why shouldn't he act this way? So what you end up with is that at the beginning of the song, he's defining himself as I want. But the entire song then spends its time defining him as I am. I want Esmeralda because I am a bad person. And as a result, I am fallen. What's also interesting is that the Latin chorus increases the words that it uses to increase the amount of fault he has when he's making excuses. In the beginning, when he's saying, it's not my fault, I'm not to blame, it's just saying mea culpa, through my fault. But when he says, it's the gypsy girl, she's the one to blame, the chorus changes to me maxima culpa, which means his most grievous fault, his biggest fault, is that he's blaming her. And then the chorus switches back to mea culpa until he says that God made the devil much stronger than the man, at which point the chorus goes back to me maxima culpa. And then what's most interesting is that after he says that God made devil stronger than a man, the chorus stops. When he says, protect me, and starts talking about how he's going to set Esmeralda on fire, the chorus is no longer there. The chorus is no longer saying it's his fault, because the chorus has given up on him, because he's given up on God. When he's saying, don't let her curse me, don't let her do this to me, the chorus doesn't refer to him, because he's already turned away from God. He's already committed himself to being sinful. He won't take responsibility, and so there's no protection for him. All of this is way more interesting than anything else that happens in the movie, because the song itself has so many layers. It's like an onion. There's just so much there that defines this song. There's just so much about this that defines this movie. And while I know that the Hunchback of Notre Dame is about Quasimodo and his search for humanity and the inhumanity of the people around him, honestly, the song Hellfire makes a big argument for, you could make this into a really good tragedy. Like, think about this for a second. The tragedy of a man who turns away from God and destroys himself because he's so lustful and he wants Esmeralda so much. And so the Hellfire song becomes the turning point where he no longer believes, even if he thinks he does, because he can't accept that he himself is fallen because of his own pride. The song starts with him saying that he's proud of his own godly devotion, his greatest sin, and then it spends the whole song defining him as being a terrible person because of his own pride. And yeah, there's a little allegory there to, like, Lucifer and, Paradise Lost. And you could also add to the fact that his referencing of fire goes from fearful to almost loving. Fire goes from something he's terrified of to something he embraces and wants to use. He's tempted by the fire because he's tempted by the idea of an easy way out. Fire is his tool to either get what he wants, that being Esmeralda, or his tool to cleanse himself of his temptation. And so fire goes from this thing he's terrified of to this thing he embraces as he falls down the road to hell. Again, all of this is way more interesting than anything else in the movie. And now that I've studied it a bit more, now that I've listened to the lyrics a bit more, now that I've thought about it, I realize that if I could be okay if the movie The Hunchback of Notre Dame didn't exist. I think I could trade that, if that didn't exist. But I think that it would be a bigger loss if the song Hellfire didn't exist. Without this song, the movie really doesn't have any reason to exist. There's nothing about the movie aside from this song that gives it a reason to exist in the world. And so, I would be comfortable if, they never made The Hunchback of Notre Dame, but I wouldn't be comfortable if they never made the song Hellfire, because of just how deep and how interesting it is. Now, I admit I never really expected to make a video about a single song from a movie I don't even particularly like, but honestly, it was too interesting for me not to talk about to me. I was so interested thinking about it and delving into it that I just kind of want to get my thoughts out about. It's honestly kind of it's a gem inside of a movie I don't even particularly like. Yeah, that's really all I have to say. So, yeah, see you all next time.